Hello, and welcome to the next installation of the Georgia Defense Industrial Base Task Force webinar series. The task force is a partnership between the Georgia Department of Economic Development and the Technology Association of Georgia. I am Cassia Baker. I work with the Georgia Department of Economic Development Center of Innovation for Aerospace, and I'm the project manager for OLDCC grant initiatives. I'm also a member of the task force. The task force produces educational content and monthly webinars primarily focused on CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. For more information on our work, you're welcome to visit our landing page, which can be reached at georgia.org/cybersecurityedge. You can also visit TAG's website, where you can learn more about previously archived webinars or follow recent events at tagonline.org/GA-DIBT. Lastly, you can reach out to me directly. I'd be happy to support you further or connect you with additional resources. I can be reached at cbaker@georgia.org. And at the end of the broadcast, we'll repeat all of this contact information as well. Today, we're joined by Roy Hadley Jr., who is also a member of the task force. Roy is special counsel at Adams Reese, LPP. He is also LLP. He is also a member of the Technology Association of Georgia's Information Security Society and is chair of that committee. Lastly, Roy was recently named to Security Magazine's Top Cybersecurity Leaders of 2021. So Roy, thank you for being here. And let's dive right in with a very big question, which is, can you level set for all of us? What's the state of cybersecurity in Georgia and also the US overall? Where are we at? Why is cyber important?
Thanks, Cassia. Just happy to be here with everybody today. That's a great question, just a fundamental question, regardless of where you are, what you do, what business you're in, all of those sorts of things. Cybersecurity is one of those things that really just is a thread that is just common goes throughout our whole society today, whether it's business, your personal life, religious institutions, schools. It really doesn't matter. Our society is mobile. We are technologically inclined. We have computers that run everything. Processes that used to be manual are now automated, and as such, we are so reliant on computers and phones and mobile devices. And if you don't think you are, turn them off for a few hours and see how quickly you go into detox on your computers and your cyber stuff. But because of that, you're looking at kind of, again, that common thread, and that thread is you have to keep these devices secure. We've seen, whether it's with elections, whether it's with the theft of intellectual property, whether it's ransomware, and the list goes on and on and on. You're seeing bad actors that really are doing some nefarious things. You're starting to see bad actors affect power grids. You're starting to see bad actors affect financial institutions and financial systems. You're starting to see bad actors affect healthcare systems. There were some scares around, or concerns is probably the better word, around the vaccinations that have been rolled out in response to the pandemic and, the underlying intellectual property there. And so, when you look at that, you have to say cybersecurity really kind of permeates it all. And if you can't keep something secure, then you're going to be in trouble, no matter what the industry is. I know a lot of the people listening to this are in the defense industrial base. And so CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, is of interest to them. But regardless of who you are, you really need to be thinking about cybersecurity. You need to be thinking about a culture of cybersecurity, because the bad actors are out there and they're better than ever. They are very sophisticated. A lot of them are nation state now. It used to be that the bad actors were young people in a room hacking, and they wanted to put a skeleton on your website and you've been hacked. Now it's much more insidious. These nation state actors, that's what they do. They're professional, they're highly trained. And so they're coming at vulnerabilities, and their main thing, with the exception of ransomware, is not to be seen, to get in their effect system, steal intellectual property. And so you just have to have your guard up, regardless of what industry you're in, regardless of where you think you might be. And some of the things we're going to talk about today are those basics. We're also going to talk about a little bit more sophisticated stuff. But, in terms of level setting, cybersecurity should be of concern to everyone.
And Roy, you touched on something in that answer that I'd like you to go back to, which is the culture aspect. So I talk to businesses every week, and one of the issues that keeps coming up is how to get the entire team on board with necessary changes to be ready. So many people tell me that if they're, project manager for compliance, it's hard to get the C-suite involved and on board with what they need to move forward. Can you talk a little bit about how to speak to your team internally and get them on board with cybersecurity changes?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Cassia. We've always said, when we go into organizations, that organizations, in order for it to be effective, you've got to adopt a culture, I call it, of cybersecurity. And that culture really starts at the top. And, cybersecurity, privacy, those things are not IT issues. And a lot of times you go into organizations and they say, oh, well, that's an IT issue. And it is, but it isn't. It is an organization issue. And so what does that mean? It means the C-suite, the CEO, the CFO, the general counsel have to be on board. It means that your IT department, CISO, CIO, have to be on board. If you're a public company or a nonprofit, your board has to be on board. And then you take that culture, and that culture kind of permeates down throughout the organization. But if the leadership is not on board, then that culture of cybersecurity is going to fail. It's almost a given. And then you have to help people understand. The rank and file people are always going to be your best line of defense, and they're going to be your biggest vulnerability. But your employees, your people need to understand what's at stake, and they need to understand how their little part can make a big difference. And so one of the things that we always talk about is, we start talking in technical terms, and we start talking about things like Active Directory and network segmentation. Your rank and file person does not understand that, but they can understand them not getting paid potentially. They can understand their benefits not being there because a system has been hacked. You have to put it in terms of things that they can understand, but then you have to also put it in terms of actions that they can take or don't take that will make a difference. Clicking on that email or not clicking on it can make a difference. It can make a huge difference. And your employees need to understand that. And so when you start talking about a culture of cybersecurity, that's really what you're talking about. There are, obviously things you can do, and we'll talk about some of those, passwords and two-factor authentication and stuff like that, that employees can do that will help, not clicking on links on emails. But the culture and making cybersecurity front and center in everybody's mind every day is really what's going to drive the biggest and best adoption and protections for your organization.
So Roy, you mentioned the word basics there that I want to go back to, which is a lot of us have reset after all the changes in the pandemic and all the many things that we've had to tackle this past year. A lot of us have had a minute to pause, and now we're trying to get back to basics and what's important. So many people in our audience are, as you mentioned, members of the DIB, and they have had to comply with so many things over the years. NIST 800-171, DFARS, and now the new CMMC requirements. What can businesses in general, not just businesses in the DIB, learn from something as straightforward as CMMC level 1? What are a few key takeaways?
So, CMMC level 1, and for those that are not subject to CMMC at the present time, goes from level 1 to level 5. Level 1 is just basic cyber hygiene. Level 3 is roughly equivalent to NIST 800-171, and then level 5 is very sophisticated stuff where you really are talking about state secrets and highly confidential information. But going back to level 1 for CMMC, that's really just talking about basic cyber hygiene, and that's the thing that everybody can understand. And any business, any business that's operational should at a minimum strive to achieve kind of the precepts in CMMC level 1. So it's basic stuff like password hygiene. What does that mean? It means having, requiring complex passwords for your system. So you can't have 1, 2, 3, 4 or A, B, C, D, and you'd be surprised at how many people have those still because password hygiene isn't enforced. Changing your passwords regularly, requiring that to happen is going to be key. Stuff like, if you get a camera like the one that I'm using here today, or if you get a surveillance camera for your premises, or something else like that, any kind of equipment, most of them come with default passwords. Changing those passwords, typically that default password is 1, 2, 3, 4 or password. And the bad actors, even very sophisticated unsophisticated bad actors, go there first. And so not only your passwords for your computers and stuff like that, but your passwords for those other systems, passwords for your phones, making sure that if those devices are connected to your network, that they have passwords, and there's a password policy on those, other than the simple 4-digit password. And even if they're not connected to your network, enforcing some type or suggesting some type of password policy for your employees will be helpful. Two-factor authentication is also an easy one, so that before somebody can log into your network, for example, they have to authenticate their, via a mobile device or some other second device, so that even if somebody finds that password, they still have to authenticate through a second device, which is typically a mobile phone held by the employee. That's an easy lift. Understanding backups, whether you are now backing up to the cloud through, some kind of type of cloud-based system, or whether you have to do it via old-fashioned hard drives, backing up. And that's going to be a very good strategy for resisting ransomware attacks, and mitigating the harm of those. Because if you have a good backup, you can then restore that backup. Now, one thing I do want to mention to people is vendor management. Vendor management is not one that really often comes up in terms of a culture of cybersecurity, but vendor management is going to be key also. And what does that mean? So if you are using a cloud-based system, if you, for email and file management, understand that vendor and understand what security, precautions they take with respect to their systems. Because what we're seeing is that the bad actors are moving away, Cassia, from just trying to attack you, but because if they can attack the vendor, and we just saw that with SolarWinds, then all of a sudden you've got one attack with thousands of victims, instead of one attack with one victim. So understanding what your vendors do, understanding your procurement process, and weaving vendor management and cybersecurity into your procurement processing, and making sure you just ask the right questions, those basic questions, so that you can understand what your vendors are doing. Just stuff. We just did an assessment for somebody, and this isn't a cybersecurity thing, but they had checks that they kept in an unlocked drawer in a desk. Little stuff like that. That's not a level 1 culture of cybersecurity, but it goes to the mindset that you need to have with respect to cybersecurity. And there are a lot of tools out there that can go into those basic things that you need to be thinking about cybersecurity. And, so rather than belabor it and keep on with those right now, I'm going to just pause, but there are tools out there. And if you reach out to Cassia, she can help you find and get your hands on those tools. Those tools are free. She actually has some that can be helpful to you. But you just have to have that culture of cybersecurity and be thinking about cybersecurity all the time.
I love that, Roy. And it reminds me of things that we take for granted in our personal life as just being basic good sense. Like our phones are always password protected. We store our flash drives away from, the prying eyes of younger siblings or family members. All of those things we take for granted in our personal life because we just do them as a basic part of our day.
Right.
But it's good to reflect on that and think about it in terms of our businesses.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned vendors. What are maybe one or two good questions to ask a vendor who might be handling your general IT needs?
Right. So, that's a great question. And a lot of it depends upon what they're doing for you. But, you can ask them, if they're doing your cloud-based email, for example, or your cloud-based management, a very good question is, are you NIST 800-171 compliant? Great question. Because if their eyes glaze over and they don't have the slightest idea what you're talking about, that is a problem, right? For that kind of vendor, they at a minimum should know what you're talking about. And then from there, you can go into, kind of what are they doing and their compliance and all of that. But that's a great threshold question. And then you can follow it up with, okay, what is your cybersecurity posture? Please tell me about your cybersecurity program. Another good question is to ask, can I see your cybersecurity incident response plan? Or sometimes that's going to be confidential, but do you have one? Do you have a cybersecurity incident response plan? And, without going into the particulars, the reason those are good questions is it underscores and highlights whether that particular vendor has cybersecurity on their mind, whether they have taken steps to make themselves and their platforms and their programs and their services more resilient. And again, you can, then start getting into the particulars if it makes sense. But just those threshold questions, are key to kind of making sure that they're thinking about cybersecurity. I often laugh, and this has nothing to do with cybersecurity, when clients would come to me and say, oh, somebody wants me to invest in this big project that they're doing. And my first question to them is, have they done it before? Have you ever done this before? Because if you haven't, I don't want to be the guinea pig. And I then take that to the cyber world. Are you NIST 800-171 compliant? Do you have an incident response plan? Because if you don't, then I'm being the guinea pig. I'm being, and being the guinea pig in that instance can have extremely detrimental consequences. So for me, those are kind of the threshold questions I would ask. And again, you don't necessarily have to understand what NIST 800-171 is, and you don't necessarily have to understand whether an incident response plan is good or bad. But if they don't have one, and if they don't understand what NIST 800-171 is, you might want to look elsewhere for those services.
Thanks, Roy. That's really practical. And I like that you're reminding our audience that there are so many, again, daily habits that we have in other parts of our business life and our personal lives that are really compliant with a lot of these basic requirements, but we forget to apply those directly to the cyber hygiene of our companies.
Right.
So let's talk for a minute, switching gears, about smaller businesses.
Right.
So I just read a study that said approximately 14% of businesses across the US, small businesses in particular, the study was focused on, are both prepared for and ready to recover from any form of data loss or breach. And I was surprised that it was only 14%. To you, from your perspective, does that sound like a fair number? And then if so, what do you think is holding smaller businesses back from taking these basic steps to protect themselves?
Unfortunately, that number does sound right. It may even sound a little high, believe it or not. But you can look at things glass half full, glass half empty. Because you could say 14% are uh, feel they're ready, which means 80%, 86%, if my math is right, feel they're not ready, and that's just a crazy number to think about. That many small businesses don't believe that they're ready for cybersecurity or to thwart or mitigate a cyber attack. And there are a lot of reasons, but it primarily, in my mind, comes down to two. The first being awareness, and the second being money. And you could maybe throw a little third in there, resources, but we'll call that 2A. But in terms of awareness, a lot of businesses, small businesses in particular, are more focused on delivering that service, and margins are thin. So that cupcake shop really doesn't think that they have a cybersecurity issue. That's going to be, if they have 10 top 10 issues, cybersecurity is probably going to be number 22, until something happens. Then it's going to be issue number one, because the shop is shut down and you can't ring customers up, and all of that, or your customer list got leaked, and now all of your customers are getting these spam emails and things, and they say, I'm not coming back to you. Again, is number 22 until something happens. Once something happens, then it does get escalated to number one. But awareness, just that it's going to be a problem eventually, if you don't do something. Ransomware in particular is a big issue for small businesses, because let's just say you run a print shop, and all of a sudden your business is impacted by ransomware, and you cannot perform the services. You can't print anything, you can't bill anything, you can't collect money. You're just dead in the water until you pay that ransom. And even then, you may not get your data back, your systems may not be unlocked. But awareness that your business nowadays runs on systems and computers, and if those are impacted, your business can be impacted. The second thing, cost. I think a lot of small businesses, again, margins are thin. They're trying to make payroll, they're trying to pay rent, and just are afraid that this is going to cost a lot of money to implement some kind of cybersecurity program. And so the mindset sometimes is, if I don't ask the question, then I won't get the answer, then I don't have to worry about it. And that's always not a good way to look at things. But I think for a lot of businesses, it's just, I'm just not going to ask the question because I don't want to know the answer. My message to those small businesses, again, is there are a lot of tools out there and a lot of resources out there that can help you to achieve just a basic level of cybersecurity and cyber hygiene and a culture of cybersecurity. There's free training out there for employees. There are, all sorts of just things and resources that you can take advantage of that cost little to nothing. And then again, some of the things that we're talking about, like changing your passwords, like getting two-factor authentication, like changing passwords on equipment you buy. Those things don't cost a lot of money, and you can avail yourselves of those little things that can make a big difference. Even if it means backing up your computers and your databases yourself once a week onto an external hard drive that you bought from Costco or Walmart or Best Buy or somewhere like that. And then a ransomware attack happens. That little thing, which costs you a couple $100s, may be the saving grace for your business. So I look and I say there are so many things that you can do, but I think those are the things that really kind of make those small businesses come in at that 14% number instead of 50 or 60 or 70%.
I like what you said there, because really it's just an ounce of prevention is always worth a pound of cure.
Absolutely.
And part of this is helping people be circumspect about where their vulnerabilities are before someone else sees them.
Right. That's absolutely correct. And they're looking, they're out there, and you always hear it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. And there, and the running joke in my line of work is there are two types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that just don't know it yet. So, it's there. But again, if there was a takeaway for a small business, there are things out there that can help you that are free or very little cost, and incremental steps, are better than nothing. So you may not, if there are 10 things you ought to do, you may not be able to do but one or two, but doing those one or two are going to be infinitely better than doing nothing, because you can't do all 10.
That makes sense, Roy. Another question that I have for you is, when we're talking about cybersecurity threats, I think a lot of people have assumptions about what that means. So can you talk about different ways that your cyber could be breached? Many people think immediately of phishing emails, for example, that they have to click on something to be exposed. But can you talk about different ways that your systems are vulnerable? Maybe just give us 2 or 3 examples that you've seen from small to mid-sized businesses.
Absolutely. So very recently, I had a situation with a small business where they're, and this is going to sound sophisticated, but what happened was uh, they had a bank and they had a banking relationship, and everybody does online banking now, either through your computer or mobile app or that sort of thing, and they were doing it through the computer, but they couldn't remember the logon, so they Googled, you know bank name, log on, and a link popped up in the Google search, and sure enough, they clicked it, and that link was a link to a bad site. And so, but it looked like the bank site. They typed in their password, and their login credentials, and typed it in, and then the site said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're having a little problem here. Call help desk." And they called the help desk, and the help desk was the bad actor. And again, long story short, they lost a few $100,000 from their bank account. And it could have been prevented if they just hadn't Googled login, right? So everything else was working like it should. And the part I forgot to mention was they actually did have two-factor authentication. And when they called that bad number, the bad actor's number that popped up, the bad actor said, "Oh, we just sent you, the two-factor authentication code. What is it?" The employee gave that code to the bad actors. They put it in to the real bank website, and away you go. Hundreds of thousands of dollars are gone. And it's, stuff like that. I mean, that's again, a cyber hygiene thing to train your employees. Don't Google links. Don't Google login links. Know what the link is and type it into your browser. Stuff like that. I had another instance where somebody was trying to do an ACH payment. That's the automatic clearinghouse payments, and they got an email from somebody with the link, not the link, but the account information, and they didn't verify it. They didn't call and verify it verbally. And what had happened, the bad actors had, through a phishing attack, had infiltrated their email, the company's email, and was just sitting there waiting on one of these transactions to happen. When they saw that it was about to happen, they sent an email immediately with the bad bank account information. The employee looked at it, said, "Oh, this is part of that transaction I'm doing." Sent it. Long story short, there, a few $100,000 gone. And what happened there was, again, one of the things that we always talk about with cyber hygiene is anytime you're sending a wire transfer or an ACH, and you get wiring instructions, you pick up the phone and call somebody that you've been dealing with on that transaction at a phone number, and you verify the information with them. Now, both of those on their face are very sophisticated attacks, but the reason I kind of highlighted them is most people think of a bad actor is going to sit there and somehow hack into your computer. They don't have to do that. Most times, most attacks or incidents are human related. They are attacks on people, getting people to do things that then bypass all of the systems and things that you have in place to keep things from happening. So I give those to say, people are the things that you really need to focus on. If you have $1, spend it on training, spend it on training your people and helping your people to understand what they should and shouldn't be doing and their best practices, because that's going to be the best dollar spent. Again, you can have all the sophisticated systems in the world and try to address it from a technology standpoint, and that often makes sense to have those systems, but your people also are going to be where you need to invest money continuously. Training once a year doesn't work. Training once a month is much, much better.
I love how that answer highlights your original answer a while back about culture and how this has to be built into and baked into the whole culture.
That's right. That's exactly right. If it's not in the culture, you're doomed.
So Roy, of course, time has flown by with you. So we're nearly at the end of time. And if you're looking at your crystal ball into 2021, as we move forward, hopefully post many of the issues we've been experiencing currently, if a business thinking about how to get started with just reassessing where they are at with their basic cybersecurity hygiene,
right,
even before they start looking at requirements like CMMC, what are one or two pieces of advice that you would give them on just how to get started in assessing where they're at and what needs to happen next?
My first piece of advice would be to call Cassia and make her help you. Yeah, and she'll help you for free. But no, in all seriousness, there are resources out there, and I think that's the main takeaway. So, for example, NIST has a self-assessment that you can download it free off the internet. We can get you the links to that. That's going to be helpful. Now, admittedly, it's a little wordy and a little technical in some respects, but it is going to help you, particularly if you have a little bit more sophisticated business. There are a lot of checklists out there, and we can get you some of those that really kind of help on the basic level of, okay, what does cyber hygiene look like? What are some of the things that I need to be thinking about for it? And the Georgia Department of Economic Development has some of those also. So in all seriousness, reach out to Cassia, because she can help you find those resources that are appropriate to you. I think the takeaway though on those resources is, it's easy to get discouraged, is the word I'll use, when you look at these and you say, oh my goodness, this checklist is 30 pages. There's no way I'm going to understand that. But look at it, look through it, because there are going to be things in there that you can do that will help your organization to be more resilient, to recover faster should something happen, from a training standpoint to help you. And again, if there are 10 things that you should be doing, even if you can do 2 of them or 3 of them, do those rather than just say, I can't do all 10, so I'm not going to do anything. Because again, you have to look at cybersecurity as a journey and not as a sprint. So, and it's an everlasting journey. The bad actors are always looking to exploit the newest vulnerability. They're always looking to probe. They're always looking for weaknesses. And so we as cybersecurity professionals, but more importantly, you as a business owner, whether you're a small business owner or a medium or large business owner, you have to be thinking about cybersecurity, and kind of circling around to where we started the conversation, because everything now is computerized. Everything is about data. And it's whether it's your data, whether it's your customers' data, that data is like gold. And I think it was Dillinger, maybe I may have this wrong, but when asked why do you rob banks, and the response was that's where the money is. And why do these criminals come after you and your business? Because that's where the data is, that's where the information is, and that's where, through your bank accounts and stuff like that, that's where the money is. So that's the thing I would say, little steps, but steps nevertheless. The first, any journey begins with the first step.
Thanks, Roy. That's very practical, and it leads us back to where we started, which is reminding our viewers where they can access some of the resources that you mentioned. You're welcome to visit the landing page, which has links to a few of the resources I noticed that Roy highlighted. That can be reached at georgia.org/cybersecurity-edge. You can also visit Tag Online, which has links to blog posts about controls and practices that you can implement, as well as archived webinars. That can be reached at tagonline.org/GA-DIBT. So we'd like to thank our guest today, Roy Hadley Jr. Appreciate
Pleasure.
his time, his practical advice, and thank all of you for watching with us and listening in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roy.